In this episode of Blender Bitstream, I'm looking at a powerful way to cheat at 3D modeling using the data transfer modifier, specifically normal data transfer. Data transfer is a powerful tool and it's way too big to cover in one episode. We've already looked at vertex color transfer on the channel, but we haven't touched on normal transfer, and that one is incredibly useful. I'm starting with a plastic watering can that has a few mesh areas that need to be joined. So I'll begin by selecting the handle mesh and switching to edit edge mode. With the end loop selected, I press E and pull the extrusion straight through the main body so it passes through the mesh. Now if I press Ctrl 3, Blender converts the selected edges into faces, and I can use the bisect tool to cut a line that runs roughly parallel to the surface. After that, I delete the edges below the cut, set snapping to face nearest, and then snap the edge loop onto the surface of the main object. Then I scale the snapped loop up by about 10%, and use edge nearest to snap the scaled loop back onto the main body again. Now that the loop matches the shape of the base object, I add a loop cut roughly where I want the data transfer to start, which will act as the edge of the bevel. Then I delete the edges below that cut. Next I select the edge loop again, press E to extrude and right click to cancel. Blender still creates the new edge, which I then scale out uniformly by about 30%, depending on how wide the bevel needs to be. Now that I have the edge loop set up, I add a vertex group in the data panel. I'll leave the name as group, and with the edges still selected, I click assign. This gives those verts a weight of 1, which you can see here in the weight paint mode. Once the vertex group is set up, I add a shrink wrap modifier and set that vertex group as the one I just created. Then I set the target to the main body object. This snaps only the edges in that group to the surface. The loop usually needs a bit of adjustment after the shrink wrap is added, but it's much easier to shape at this stage. The transfer works best when as much of the loop as possible is making clean contact with the surface of the source object. After the shrink wrap is corrected, the mesh is ready for data transfer. Just like before, I select the vertex group I made earlier and set the base object as the source. Then I expand and enable face corner data, set it to nearest face interpolated, and make sure custom normals is turned on. In viewport shading, I turn off outline so I can clearly see the normals being transferred, and I also disable overlays so I'm only looking at the mesh surface. In the shader workspace, I quickly set up a bumpy plastic material so I can demonstrate how to remove texture seams during the transfer. To drive the bump, I use a noise texture set to 350. With that node selected, I press Ctrl T to add the node wrangler texture coordinates, and I switch them to object. Then I plug the noise output into the height input of a bump node, and plug that into the normal input. I'll also assign the material to the base object, and then I'll Ctrl, Shift, and left click on the noise node so I can see it directly. You can see the seam here because the two objects are separate. I can fix that by setting the texture coordinate object to the base object. This handle object needs a data transfer connection at both ends, and that's easy to set up. I just add the second end loop to the same vertex group I created earlier. I went ahead and finished modeling the object with data transfer, and you can see just how useful and time-saving this technique really is. Hopefully this helps you speed up your modeling process and build cleaner props with less effort. If you'd like to support the channel, leave a like and subscribe for more Blender Bitstream. Thanks.